All right, continuing on with the TMCC Library Open Genealogy Lab Outstanding Guest Speaker Series, today we are pleased to present Marleen Van Horne. Marleen is a California native and attended San Jose State University and the University of Minnesota. She worked 25 years for the telephone company, starting as a directory assistance operator and retiring as a systems analyst. She began her genealogical research in April 1994. Since retiring in 1999, she has devoted most of her time researching her ancestors. Before its demise, she managed 16 mail lists at RootsWeb. She began her first DNA project at Family Tree DNA in 2005 and now manages 16 projects. So I would like to offer a warm virtual welcome to Marleen.
Thank you. All right. The picture here is the Horn, Denmark Parish Church. And if I remember correctly, these records in this church don't start until the 1700s. And my ancestor immigrated in the 1600s, so he doesn't appear in the records there. The title of today's talk is, Who Was Your Father and Where Did His Ancestors Come From? And I've got my name, the date, my phone number if you want to call me, and my email address if you want to write to me. There are two basic types of DNA that we use to identify ancestors. Now, this diagram is for autosomal DNA, and it basically shows you that autosomal DNA is really only good for 5 generations. If you're lucky, you can get matches that go back further than that. I have at least one that goes back 9 generations. But by the time you reach the 5th generations, you're sharing on average only 3.125% of your DNA with any of the ancestors at that level. So it's very, very difficult to confirm a match. Also, there's a problem with men in that under yDNA, you can go back 10 generations. You can even go back further, but the testing companies that test yDNA usually do not go beyond the point where you can identify 10 generations. So there's quite a difference. And really with autosomal DNA, supposing you have a male ancestor and you have matches and those matches go back 5 generations, you have no guarantee that there wasn't some kind of a transfer between the yDNA and of your ancestor and somebody else. So beyond 5 generations, you have no guarantee of the surname. And that's the main difference between autosomal and yDNA. All of us have 7,200 centimorgans of autosomal DNA, half of which we get from our father and half from our mother. And a centimorgan, if you think of it as like a measure of length, I'll tell you, it's not a measure of length, but it's easier to understand if you think of it that way. When you look at your autosomal test results, you'll see where you share a certain number of centimorgans with an individual, or if you look at the chromosome browser and you look at how much autosomal DNA you share with each individual on the chromosome browser, you'll see it's laid out like a yardstick. And so if you just think of it as length, even though it's not, it'll be easier to understand. Okay, now where yDNA is concerned, yDNA is a matter of going in and looking at certain locations on the Y chromosome and seeing how many times the nucleotides C, G, A, and T are repeated at a particular location. And the number of times they were repeated are these numbers that you get as your test results. And it's not necessary to have a match for all of the markers to match one another. Right now, we have a choice between 12, 25, 37, 67, and 111 marker tests. The more markers you test, the more accurate your match is going to be. If you only test 12 markers, you're allowed one mutation, and the common ancestor at 12 markers is about 40,000 years ago. For 25 markers, it's about 25,000 years ago, and these are essentially useless where genealogy is concerned. When you get to a 37 marker test, you're allowed 4 mutations, and the idea is that your common ancestor lived about 500 years ago. And at 67 mutations and at 111, at 67 markers and 111 markers, you're allowed 7 and 11 mutations. And this is to identify a common ancestor within the last 500 years. Now, the reason for the last 500 years is that that is the time that paper records has existed. And so theoretically, if you get a match at one of those levels, you have a chance of identifying that person and finding documentation to support the identification. The other type of mutation that you encounter with yDNA are single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNPs. Now, when we first started doing yDNA testing, we didn't really know anything about SNPs. And it was 10 years before SNPs came into effect. And SNPs are what autosomal DNA is based on. SNPs are also what the haplogroup of yDNA is based on. And here are some examples where you have two individuals, and you can see TACG, those are the normal nucleotide readings for that position. In this one, we've got CG and CG, and here we've got TA and TA and TA and CG. Basically, what's happening is this one matches this one, but this one doesn't match. It's got a different reading on the second part of the chromosome. You know, each of our chromosomes comes in 2 parts because of the spiral, and on one you get copy 1 and you get copy 2, and here it doesn't match and here it does. It's just the way that they look at it. Okay, prior to 2010, haplogroups were identified by a series of letters and numbers based on mutations found in the STRs matching haplotypes. A haplotype is one individual's personal genome. A haplogroup is a collection of genomes that match one another with an acceptable number of mutations. Now, this is an example of the old type of haplogroup. And I'm not a scientist, but I gather this is the type of identification that has been used for many years in the scientific community. Then in 2010, it was discovered that SNP mutations are very interesting. And one of the things they do is like create a timeline. Certain SNPs happened at certain periods of time, and you can go down this calendar, you might say, of SNPs, and you can identify family groups. For example, if you take the gorilla and look at the SNPs in the gorilla's genome and compare that to the SNPs in the chimpanzee's genome, you find that there's a difference of about 1,000 between the gorilla and the chimpanzee. And then when you compare the chimpanzee's genome to the human being's genome, you find that there's another 1,000 differences in the SNPs between the chimpanzee and a human being. So the identification for haplogroups was changed based on this calendar of mutations, you might say. And the haplogroup identifications now appear as an alpha letter, which represents the haplogroup, a dash, and another set of alpha characters, which may be 1 or could be 2, might be 3, and then a number. This set of alpha characters here identifies the lab that found that mutation, and the number is the number that that lab arbitrarily assigns. The R at the beginning, or the alpha character at the beginning, identifies the haplogroup. And haplogroups are identified by alphabetical characters starting at A and going through, I believe they go through Z, but any haplogroup identification that begins with an A, that means that individual's ancestors originated in Africa. Those that begin with an R, like this example that I used here, indicates that the ancestors of the individual who has this haplogroup originated in Western Europe. There are haplogroup J. This usually indicates a Jewish origin. And in my case, I have a haplogroup V in mtDNA, which we're not discussing here, but the idea is the same. And my haplogroup comes from Lapland, up above the Arctic Circle. So apparently sometime in the past, I had female ancestors who came from there. But in the case of yDNA, all yDNA is now identified with identifiers in this form. Okay, this is an example from the Open Project. And you can see here, all of these people are identified as RM269, except for this one. Now, the reason this one is in green is they had to do some extra testing to confirm it. The ones that are in red are all assumed. And all of these results that I'll be showing here come from family tree DNA. The reason being that family tree DNA is currently, as far as I know, the only company that does yDNA testing for genealogical purposes. And family tree DNA is also the company that originated genealogical testing, genetic testing for genealogical purposes. Now, this individual here, who has a haplogroup of RS1610, did what is called the big Y at family tree DNA. And that means that they tested 700 locations on their Y chromosome until they got down to the most recent SNP mutation in that genome. And the most recent SNP mutation in that genome was RS1610. Around 2000, when genetic testing first started, the National Geographic commissioned Spencer Wells to go out around the world and DNA test people in all kinds of places, remote and not remote. And they basically created a map where most of these haplogroups originated. So once you find a terminal SNP, which is what this is called, or I should actually say a semi-terminal SNP, because as I'll show later, it's possible to have a terminal SNP identified, and then somebody else comes along and has another one identified and another one. You're all related, but one is a successor of the others, and I'll show that. In this case, for the Open Project, we have only one man who's done the big Y. And when you can see here that these are the yDNA test results that are displayed at Family Tree DNA. And this is for the Open Project. Now here's one person who's tested 67 markers, and he's an exact match to the person who did the test. And then here's one for the person who did a big Y at 7, which tested 7,000 markers. And you'll see there's a 1-step mutation difference between these two men. And you'll see here he's RM269 and he's RS1610. Now, the fact of the matter is we know who our immigrant ancestor was. He was Francis Oden, but we really don't know where he came from. So taking this RS1610, I went out on the web and well, first I looked at the yDNA phylogenetic tree and came down the tree. This is just off of the main trunk of the tree, and these different SNP markers go down, and you keep going down and you get here to RS1610, and then you'll see that it's included in all of these other SNP mutations. Whoops. And I believe what this is saying is that there's 2 people that have RS1610 here at Family Tree DNA. I just haven't found this other person yet. And then you go down, and I can't remember the name of the site. Maybe it's called Genetic Homeland. But you can go there and you can put in the terminal SNP. And if they have somebody else in that project that has the terminal SNP, they'll tell you where they are. And here is one person who is right here in France. And this corresponds to the conventional research information that we have on Francis Oden and his descendants. In Francis Oden's inventory and in the inventory of some of his descendants, Francis had a parcel of books in English and French. And 2 of his grandsons also have books in French. One of the grandsons has a French atlas, and the other grandson just has another parcel of books in English and French. We also know from autosomal DNA that the Oden family had a close connection to the Brashears and Duval families of Maryland. The Oden family, Francis Oden, lived in Charles County, Maryland. And in autosomal DNA, all of us who descend from Francis Oden also show Brashears and Duval's matches in our autosomal matches, but we have no idea who these people are. I have no ancestors that I know of that were married to a Brashears and a Duval, or anywhere. So this has to have come to us from Francis Oden, and the Duval and the Brashears came from France. Now, this is just surmise based on sort of educated information, but having found this one match in France supports that. Now, the problem with France is that France apparently has a law preventing people in France from doing DNA testing, for the simple reason that they don't want men to find out that the children they're raising are not their biological children. So it's finding just this one match from France was extremely lucky. And it's very difficult if you have French ancestors to get DNA test results, matching test results, unless the matching test results come from other countries that do allow testing, and that individual knows that they came from France or that their ancestors came from France. So that's a really difficult problem for genealogists trying to trace their ancestry to France.
Marleen, we have a question in the chat box from Catherine. She says, could the second person have tested the big Y but not joined the project? She says that she descends from Maureen Duval and his wife, Susanna Brashears.
Well, if they were not, did not have the Oden name, they could have joined the project, but they wouldn't necessarily have matched on yDNA. Now, as a descendant of, supposedly a descendant from the Duvals and the Brashears, they might match me, or they might match anybody else in the project. We would have to, what you could do is look and see if you match anybody named Oden. And if you want to join the project, I'm perfectly happy to have you join the project. We don't have any particular restrictions like that, but the way it has gone so far, we haven't been able to make that connection. Does that answer your question?
Yes, and I'll look at my list.
Okay. And look and see if you have any Oden matches. Okay. Any other questions?
Not so far.
Okay. All right. Now we're on to the White Surname Project. And here we have a haplogroup of RS22567. And that is my cousin right here. And you can see he has 3 matches. This first one right here does not choose to talk to me as the manager of the project. So I have no idea about their background, and they are not named White. The second one is also a cousin, and I do have contact with them. And I'll explain why we don't have a haplogroup matching this haplogroup for him. When I get to the end of the talk, because I'm going to talk about 2 places where you can be tested. And the same thing applies to the Oden project. Because like Suzanne, I'm a big believer in inexpensive genealogy, and genealogy can get extremely expensive, as we all know. So this haplogroup, the first time I looked it up on Genetic Homeland, I got a place in Ireland. And I think I was just looking it up ad hoc. and I didn't put in the information about my cousin who actually did the test and got this haplogroup locations. So here you can see some of the matches for my cousin. This is my other cousin, and this is a Langford surname and the Grown surname, and you see both of them are 6-step difference. Now, this is where yDNA has the advantage over autosomal DNA, because already this yDNA test is telling us that the genetic match or the distance to the common ancestor is beyond what autosomal DNA can tell us. Now, I have no idea about this. It's entirely possible that this is a very widespread haplogroup, or it's entirely possible that this is a mistake. But we do know that the Whites are from Ireland, and I know nothing about the Langfords because I have looked this up, and their information doesn't go far enough back to tell us if they were from Ireland. And then again, this is what it is on the phylogenetic tree, and you have to go down and, oops, where did I lose it? Here we are, down here. And according to this, it looks like there are 7 people at Family Tree DNA that have this haplogroup. I just haven't found them. And when I went to Genetic Homelands and looked up this haplogroup, I found 2 matches, one that looks like it's up here in Massachusetts, and the other one down here in Ohio. I have no idea who these people are because I cannot get beyond the, I think my 5th great grandfather on the White surname. We know he was born in Tennessee about 1665, and that's all there is to it. And we've only had one person be able to do the big Y. All right, the next project I'm talking about is the Van Horne project. And this is the first one I started, and this is also the one that we have the most information on. When we started this project, we had like 3 or 4 people, and over the 15 years that it's been running, we've acquired quite a few and more than this. Again, we have all of these IM 253 haplogroup designations, which are assumed or predicted as opposed to having been tested. If one of them had been tested, it would be in green. But we have 2 people here who have done the big Y. And you can see their numbers are different. And I'm going to explain why this happens. Okay. We have 2 people here who have done the 111 marker test. And we have 1 person here who has done the big Y700. And that's the person that has this haplogroup ID. This person here knows from having talked to me that the family comes from Denmark. This gentleman here was raised believing that his ancestry was Dutch, and he still hasn't given in to the idea that his DNA is Danish, although he does know that it is. Now, again, we're going down the phylogenetic tree, and we have, this is right off of the main branch of the tree, and then we have to go down. And I'm going to explain why this is the way, whoops. Okay, see up here, I've identified the haplogroup as SK1234. And you can see SK1234 is here, and it lists all of these things as subordinate to it. And then you come down here and you get this Y49719, and then you get this FT59926. And this is the one that is the most current today. What happened is when we first started testing this for the terminal SNP on members of this project, they came back with ISK1234 as the terminal SNP. Well, the next time somebody tested, the testing organization tested SNPs that were subordinate to ISK1234, and they got this SNP. And then the next time it was tested, it came down and it got this SNP. The people who had this SNP, if we went back and tested them again and asked specifically for this, would show up with this in most cases. I'm not saying 100%, because it could be entirely that the individual living today, the mutations stopped and they never got this SNP. But this is a case of moving terminal SNPs as opposed to not matching, if that makes sense to you. And again,
Marleen, we have a question in the chat box on that last slide. They want to know what the little red basket meant.
The little red basket means that you can order this. And you can put it in your shopping cart. Is that okay?
Thank you.
And then
I'd like to ask a question about that.
Yeah.
I know that before the big Y500 and the 700, they did recommend testing individual SNPs, but I've heard that now they just recommend to go on and do the big Y700 because in the long run, it turns out to be less expensive than testing a bunch of SNPs.
well, let me put it like this. It depends on how you do it. And I'm going to get to that, because remember I said earlier that we only had one big Y700 for the Odins and the Whites. And I'm going to explain why that is true. Now, in the case of the Van Hornes, the ones that are listed here tested with a family tree DNA. And you see this IFT, that means family tree. The IBY also means family tree DNA test. I did not test my brother with family tree DNA for the terminal SNP. I knew that ISK1234 was a terminal SNP for a person in this family. So I went to another company and just tested that SNP. And I'll explain how you do that. But in order to do that, first you have to have an idea of what SNP you're looking for. You can't just hunt and peck around for a possible SNP. Now, if I need to do my brother again, and when I do him again, I'm either going to test him for this IFT59926, and this may have a different name. The other testing company that I'm going to go to has their own names on it. Now, when you see these IY, anything that has a Y as the testing company is a SNP that was identified by the company I'm going to talk about in a couple of minutes. But the identification of the terminal SNP is a moving target, because every day you might say somebody does some more testing and you get a new SNP. Now, this is a map of the incidences of people with SK123 terminal SNP from southern Sweden and northern Denmark. Now, this was only done on 25 markers, and it was shared with me by, I can't pronounce Peter's last name, by Peter, who is SK1234. And he has done further testing, so he knows he's moved beyond this, but he was able to create this map from what he was able to find. Now, this right here is the town of Joring, and this province here is known as Joring. But between Joring and I believe it's Friedrichshafen, like straight across here, about in the middle is the little wide spot in the road known as Horn. And when my my Danish ancestors chose a surname about 1715, they chose the surname Van Horne, which means from horn. So we not only have the DNA evidence that they came from this area as opposed to the Netherlands, but we have the fact that they chose as their surname the name of the town where my ancestor presumably came from. So this is what is the most important thing about yDNA testing. yDNA testing will tell you how far back in time your surname match goes with other people of that surname. And if, for example, you have a case where the surname of the person who's tested and he has a match, and that match has the same surname that he has, and they have no mutations between them, or 1 or 2 or 3, then that means that those two men are from the family that was using the surname Anderson. But when you go further down the match results and you start seeing different surnames, and it starts saying the genetic distance is 5, the genetic distance is 7, the genetic distance is 10, then that means that the people who are named Anderson, beyond 5 generations, the family name was something else. You see here, all of these say 10 steps distance. And the reason they say 10 steps distance is because the common ancestor for all of these people is Mathis Corneliusson, born 1640 approximately, and died about 1716. So when you get 10 steps back to the common ancestor, that is a long connection of people named Van Horne. See, they're all named Van Horne. It happens that my Van Horne family wasn't too much of a what do I want to say, serial sperm dispensers or anything like that. These people were pretty straightforward. And I'm not going to say there aren't any misattributed paternities among the Van Hornes, but I will say that among the Van Hornes that descend from Mathis Corneliusson, there are very limited, if known at all. I right off the top of my head don't know of anybody who is associated with children of different surnames. Okay, so we got to showing where Mathis Corneliusson and his ancestors came from. I've done other studies that show that this family with this haplogroup and the subsequent haplogroups after it originated about 2,000 years ago. And all of the people with this haplogroup descend from that man. Okay, now these tests, most of the tests that I showed you were done at Family Tree DNA, which I explained is the company that originated DNA testing for genetic purposes. Today, they do 3 kinds of tests. They do the yDNA test and the mitochondrial DNA test for women, which are the 2 tests that they started out with. Then in 2010, when the autosomal DNA test became available, they put that into their collection. So basically, those 3 tests are available at Family Tree DNA. And off the top of my head, I don't know of anybody who does the yDNA test providing up to 111 markers of match information or anything like the big Y or the big whatever. Now, around 2005, Family Tree DNA hired, oh shoot, his first name just went out of my head. Oh, Thomas Kron, who had a company called DNA Fingerprint, I think that operated out of Switzerland. Well, Thomas and his wife came to Houston, Texas, and set up the specialty testing lab at Family Tree DNA and got all of this going. And they were there for 5 years. And at the end of 5 years, they went back to Europe and they set up a company called ySeq, which is headquartered in Berlin. Now, what I do is, and what I did in this Van Horne business was, first I had somebody who came up with this SK1234. So when I wanted to test my brother, I did not go to Family Tree DNA and order a big Y whatever. I went to ySeq and I asked to have that test done on my brother because I knew it was a terminal SNP that ran in this family, and he matched. Now the difference in cost was several $100s. The big whatever it was that was running at the time at Family Tree DNA cost, I don't know, $300, $400. When we went to ySeq and asked for that specific SNP, it cost $20. So if you have a family group where you have matches and one of them has done the big Y, I suggest that you pool together and have one of the people in the group do the big Y to find out what the terminal SNP is, then take all the rest of the people who match him and go to ySeq and order the terminal SNP. They usually run around $20. You can Google ySeq and see what terminal SNPs they're testing or they can test, and what the cost is. Now, the reason we haven't been able to do the other members of the Open Project is because ySeq does not have the primers for that haplogroup. And they also have the primers for the white haplogroup that my white family belongs to. If at any point in time that Thomas develops the primers to test for those terminal SNPs, then we can go in and probably for $20 or even less than $100, find the terminal SNP for the other matches in the white project. In the white project, the 2 men that match are my cousins. And the one that I did the Big Y700 on, unfortunately passed away about 10 years ago. And I'll tell you this, when I first asked for the Big Y, Family Tree came back and said that his sample had deteriorated and they couldn't do the Big Y on it. So I wrote back and I explained that he had done I think it's a 67 or 111 marker test, yDNA test, and he had also done an autosomal DNA test. And they were able to take the DNA from the slides from those two tests and put together enough information to do the big Y700 on him and provide a terminal SNP, which it is crucial because we only have 2 males from that family who tested as a yDNA test, and we had no idea what the terminal SNP or where the point of origin of that family would be. Now, in the case of the Odin family, where we only have the one, and I know there's a bunch of people in the Odin project who'd be willing to spend the $20 to get the terminal SNP for them, but Thomas Crohn does not have the primers for that terminal SNP, and since it comes from France, the chances, I don't know if his ability to develop the primers depends on how many people are available to be tested or what. But anyway, until Thomas or some other testing company is able to develop the primers to test for the Odin terminal SNP and the white terminal SNP, we won't be able to get them unless we spend the big money and do, and I can't ask people to do that. I don't ask people to do the big Y700. The Odin gentleman that did it, I did ask him, and his family, I think, contributed to the cost because we were desperate to find out where the Odin family came from. And we sort of found out. So this is the end of my talk. I hope it has given you some understanding of the importance of yDNA testing. Every man who is pursuing genealogy needs to have himself tested, and every woman who is pursuing genealogy and has a brother or a father or a cousin that can help prove the paternal ancestry of whoever their male family members are, needs to do that, because without it, you really do not know if you've got the right father, and you don't know who his ancestors were or where he came from. So I think that's it.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Dave Perdue here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
So let me give you a couple of minutes of my story. And so my question is, in the DNA which is done by family tree, is that anachromal DNA?
No. I thought I explained this. Family tree DNA does 3 different types of DNA, and it depends upon what you purchase.
Okay.
You can purchase a yDNA test of up to 111 markers. And that's all I recommend. I would never recommend anybody just going in and doing a big Y700. Okay. So you start out with 111. That's the best.
And so I did that. I did not do the Y. I just did one of the family trees. And I was looking for my grandfather, William Perdue, great-grandfather, William Perdue, and found a bunch of people that are Perdue's, but only back to 2nd generation, none at him or none past him. And so then I went to family tree DNA and did a Y. And I did the Y there, and I did, I think, at 37 or 64. I talked to Suzanne about it, and then I upped it to whatever the next one is, above 64. And
well, I go 37, 67, and 111.
111. And so in family tree DNA, I do not connect with any Perdue's. In the Perdue group, I'm like 3 or 4 off from anybody, but I connect to Ray's, R-A-Y. And
right.
I'm spot on at 64 with a couple of people.
Right.
And so, okay, so maybe I'm not a Perdue, maybe I'm a Ray, but Ancestry says, well, you got Perdue DNA. Is there any way to look at the 2 DNAs and see if they're the same person?
Here's the deal. I don't have much regard for Ancestry. and their
Okay.
DNA testing. Ancestry is more interested in getting your money than it is
Sure.
in giving you the actual ancestors. Now, if you have done an autosomal DNA test at Ancestry, and you have done a yDNA test at Family Tree DNA,
Right.
okay, go into your Family Tree DNA account and make arrangements to transfer your Ancestry test results to Family Tree DNA.
I've done that.
So you have your Ancestry and your Family Tree DNA test results in the same kit?
No, I don't know about kits, but I've transferred it to Family Tree.
Okay, here's the deal. Family Tree likes to have all of your testing under one kit number. Even when you did testing at another company, what you do is you go into your yDNA kit at Family Tree DNA, and when there's the places there where you can do upgrades, one of those upgrades is to transfer from somewhere.
Okay.
And you can pick that, and you can put your test results into the same kit number as your yDNA. Okay, in your case, this is a little different. I suggest you call Family Tree DNA and explain what you did, that you have one kit number for your yDNA and you have another kit number for your autosomal DNA because you transferred it. Tell them you would like to combine the test information into one kit and see if they can do it.
Okay. So my worry was that, did Family Tree DNA maybe pick the wrong, name the sample wrong, right?
No,
You don't think they would have ever done that?
absolutely not.
Okay.
In fact, I would trust whatever Family Tree DNA told you over what Ancestry told you 1,000 times,
Okay. Okay.
1,000,000
Yeah, so-
times, 1,000,000,000 times.
Yeah. So like I said, my problem is in Family Tree, I find no Purdue's, and Ancestry, I do. I'm going, should I get one of my relatives another relative
No.
to test?
If you're going to get a relative to test, have them test at Family Tree DNA, and have them, if you want a yDNA test, you have to do it there. Have them test at Family Tree DNA, and you should get
Sorry,
this
somebody
thing
was talking. Have them test at Family Tree DNA, huh?
right. Now, see, the problem is the reason one of the reasons everybody rushes to do a yDNA test at Ancestry is that they're bombarded by advertisement from Ancestry for this test. That's one reason.
You mean autosomal test?
Yeah, an autosomal test, excuse me. And the other reason is it's cheap. People look at the cost of a yDNA test and they have a heart failure. Well, which is reasonable, okay? It's not inexpensive, but it's also not expensive when you consider that there were times in the last 20 years that to do a yDNA test was $1,000 or $10,000 or more. That while $279 or whatever the cost is, and I always recommend to buy them on sale like this weekend, it's a lot of money, $279, but it's certainly not $1,000 or $10,000.
Very good.
So relatively speaking, it's cheap. And if you do the test, first, if you want to have another male Purdue tested, have them test it. And then you have my phone number and my email address. You can contact me and I will do an analysis on it for you and tell you what you've got and tell
Okay.
you where you should go from there. But
Okay,
what
so
you're,
when I combine, last, I know that people have questions. When I combine the two at Family Tree DNA, what will that tell me?
well, you mean your autosomal and your
Right, right. Correct.
And okay. Basically, here's why I like, for men, I like 111 marker yDNA test, and I like the autosomal test, because the 111 marker yDNA test will either confirm your ancestors, it'll, like it does in the Van Horns, all those Van Horns go back 10 generations, or it will show you that at some point in time in the past, the surname that you're matching wasn't Purdue.
Okay.
And that's the one thing. But the other thing is the autosomal DNA test will tell you about the wives. So you start out with your father, your grandfather, whatever it is, and you look for the surname of your grandmother and you see how you match there. Then you look great-grandmother, great-great-grandmother. See the female portion of the autosomal test supports what you know about the male portion of your ancestry.
Yeah, and on family tree, I was able to identify this William Purdue's wife, Margaret Ann Adams family. So that was great. I've got an Adams line now, which I never had from that.
Yes. But back there somewhere 5 generations back, for whatever reason, the surname switched. Now, see, there's a lot of reasons why a surname can switch. Where did they live back then?
Oh, they were from the South. Purdue's are all from the South. They were probably Huguenots. They came in the 1700s.
Okay, well, what year did that William Purdue live?
He was in 2 records only ever, and he's in the 1880 census, and he was 30 then. So he was born about 1850. Okay.
Well, the common reasons for a switch in surname is a woman marries, has a child, she dies, and her family raises the child. And the child takes on her maiden name. That's one reason. The other reason is rape.
Right.
Plain and simple. We have these itinerant sperm donors, running around the country. In fact, in the Open Project, we have 2 people on the results page that are listed as the descendants of Solomon Odin. Well, they don't have the Odin DNA. And it was a couple of years ago when we were having all this Me Too stuff on the thing, and I got to thinking, and I went in and I looked at their autosomal tests, because both men have done autosomal tests. And these men have the same surnames that all the rest of us who are Odins had, Brashears and Duval and Cave. Cave is the surname of Francis Odin's wife. And if you're a descendant of Francis Odin, you have to have the Cave surname in your autosomal DNA. You just can't be a descendant of his without it unless you're too far away and something has gone wrong. Well, I looked at these 2 descendants of Solomon, and they both had Duval, Brashears, and Cave. And I realized right away that the reason that their yDNA did not match Odin is because they descend from an Odin daughter. And then we got some yDNA matches for them with other surnames. So somewhere around Maryland, where this daughter lived, there was an itinerant sperm donor.
Right. And I was thinking that that's why I would try to get one of my cousins to do a yDNA as well.
Well, it's a good thing to do that, but depending upon when this itinerant sperm donor or whatever, let's put it that way, came into your family, you're probably going to match him.
Right. If the itinerant sperm donor was before William, then yeah, we're all going to match.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I'll try to contact you. Thank you very, 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 very much.
Okay. Any more questions?
While we're waiting, Marleen, for other questions to come in, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about, I've had the same situation where I've gone back a couple years later to retest or to upgrade Y test at, and even MT for that matter, at family tree DNA. And I've been told that the sample had deteriorated. So I kind of wanted to encourage everybody, if you do have DNA on file at family tree DNA, especially if it's for somebody who's getting older, you may want to upgrade that test as soon as possible, because the chances of it deteriorating are obviously a reality.
Yeah, and in fact, my cousin who had that problem, he was ill with a terminal illness at the time that the sample was given. So that might have had some bearing on why his sample wasn't good enough when I went in and asked to do that. But I was thrilled that they went to the effort to put the slides from the 2 previous tests together and give me a big Y700 for him.
Yeah, you were lucky. I agree.
Yeah.
It's made me actually, I'm sitting here thinking, since you did your presentation today, about how this might be the perfect time for me to go in, since the sales are going on this weekend, and upgrade all my tests.
Well, yeah, but that still could be really expensive. Anyway, if anybody has been inspired to be tested at Family Tree DNA this weekend because of the sales, by all means do. And whenever I give a talk about DNA, if somebody does that and they want me to do an analysis for them when they get the test results back, I'm happy to do it. I do that for all of my project members if they ask me.
Marleen, could you put your contact information slide back up on the screen?
There, it's down here in the corner.
Okay, but now we can see it. Perfect.
And what I prefer is write to me ahead of time and say that you'd like to have my telephone seminar. And I can only do this in the United States. I can't call Canada. Just tell me you'd like to have my telephone seminar, and we'll arrange a date and a time, and not before 11 a.m. Pacific time zone, because I don't function before then.
Now, I noticed we might have a couple of people here today that are new, and I'm not quite sure at what level that they are, but you did mention the Surname Project. Do you mind kind of going over exactly what a Surname Project is in case they don't understand?
Okay, when you test at Family Tree DNA, there are a whole bunch of volunteer people like me who have established projects for surnames or physical locations or anything like that. And you can go in and look up a surname. And if that surname exists as a project already or is included in a project already, you can join that project. If it doesn't exist and you're deep enough into genealogy, you can establish a project for that surname. Now, most of my projects are surname projects. One project this is not one I established, but this is one I have worked on for a number of years. It's for Cumberland Gap. It's for people whose families passed through Cumberland Gap when migrating west. And I'm going to say this, that project has about 10,000 people in it. It's impossible for me to file the test results in any meaningful way, and I've had to stop maintaining it. I work with 3 other people, so it isn't just me. So unless you're just absolutely desperate to be in the Cumberland Gap project, don't join it. But I have another project for Sir William Johnson, hoping to find somebody who descends from Sir William Johnson. I do, but I don't have yDNA, so that doesn't help. And I have another project for the whites, which I haven't gotten off the ground yet, but I'm trying to put together a project that is for the descendants of Samuel and Lucinda White of Lincoln County, Tennessee. It happens that my white ancestor, Samuel and Lucinda, had one son. And he had several sons, but all of his sons died before they married or had families, except one. And that man married in Kemper County, Mississippi, and lived there his entire life. And his children lived in Kemper and Neshoba County, Mississippi. And so I'm trying to get all those people into one surname project. Also, Samuel and Lucinda had 7 daughters, and I'm trying to get the descendants of those individual 7 daughters into this project, which would basically be their whole family. And it's kind of easy considering that there were 3 generations of individual males, or 2 generations, you see what I'm saying, of individual sons. So does that answer your question about what a surname project is?
Yeah, I really appreciate it, because like I said, I'm not sure with the new people what their level of understanding is.
And even if you join a project for your surname and it's not one of the projects I manage, if you have questions, you can ask me, because everybody who manages a project does it differently. Now, in my case, I don't recommend big Y 900s or 700s unless it's a last resort. And I did ask my one Odin participant, and he was willing to do it. I know he was disappointed because we got so little information back, and I forgot to explain to him about France. But first do the 111. And the more you do, the more likely you are to get some kind of results that are meaningful. Doing a 12 marker test will tell you who your common ancestor with the rest of those 12 marker people was 40,000 years ago. And I don't know that any of our ancestors were keeping genealogies then. So you're looking for somebody who lived within the last 500 years, because we pretty much have written records for the last 500 years.
Okay, Marleen, there's a couple more questions in the chat box. Suzanne would like to know, which test do you suggest a woman get from family tree DNA testing? I have already done an ancestry test and the results change constantly.
All right, you did an ancestry autosomal DNA test? Then just
so.
Yes.
just pay the $19 and transfer it to family tree DNA.
Okay, I will do that. Thanks.
Any other?
Yeah, Barbara, Barbara says in the chat box, so I tested my grand uncle at the Y67. Should I try and upgrade? He died.
Yeah, go on the test this weekend, see if you can upgrade. And if they come back and tell you that the sample isn't good enough, then point out to them that he did a 67 marker test, and can they use that? Yeah, you want to get as much out of it as you can. And now let me ask this: how important is this to you? Because if it's really important, then I'm going to say do the big Y 700. If it's only medium size important, do the 111. And we can't, since he's already gone, we can't send his sample to YSeek to get it for $20. That was the problem I had with my cousin, that I paid for the big Y 700 when then they said that his stuff wasn't good enough. Because at that particular point in time, he was the only person in my grandfather's ancestry. Well, he's a cousin of my grandfather. He was the only person in that family that could give me the yDNA for that family. So if it's that big important, then see if they can do a big Y700 on what they've got for your uncle.
Good advice.
I'd like to say, I suppose I was very, very fortunate that my cousin that we got to do, I think we started with 37 and through the years, and that was back in the right after they started offering the test, that
Yeah.
I gradually had it upgraded to 67-111, and then I had at that point did a family finder too, but then also to the big Y700. And even though it was so old, they never came back and said, so I just guess I was very fortunate, because
Yeah,
by
you-
that time he was deceased.
Yeah, you were very fortunate, and maybe he didn't have some kind of a terminal illness that he was dealing with when he gave the sample like my cousin did.
That's true.
Yeah.
He had Alzheimer's, but it didn't affect, like,
Yeah.
cancer or something.
Yeah. Any other questions?
None in the chat box, but class, this is the best time for you to unmute your microphone and ask Marleen a question. Okay, Marleen, I guess that's the end of the questions. So I will say thank you for your wonderful presentation today. And once again, thank you for allowing us to record it and put it on our YouTube channel. It'll take our marketing department a couple of weeks to get that done, but it will be on our YouTube channel. And with that, I'll just let everyone know that if you're going to stay for the second half of class, and we hope you do, we're going to be continuing on for at least another hour or so. And we have a lot of fun in the second half of class. We talk about individual problems in people's trees, or sometimes we just talk about hot genealogy topics that are hot that week. So the lab is open. So if you'd like to stay, please do. And if you'd like to leave us at this point in time, all you got to do is click on that red end button. And with that, I will end the recording at this point in time.
Suzanne, I did leave a question.
I'm still here.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Let's see here. Oh, Kathy, thank you. If you transfer your autosomal DNA to family tree, are you still a member of Ancestry?
Yes. You still have to pay the dues or whatever it is, but the transferring your test results to family tree DNA, as far as I know, doesn't have anything to do with Ancestry.
Okay, thank you.
Except that that's where the information comes from. I'm going to say one other thing. I've been a member of Ancestry since Ancestry took over RootsWeb, because I was a sponsor of RootsWeb, and as such, Ancestry gave all of the sponsors a year's free subscription. Now, I maintain my subscription to Ancestry simply to have access to the census records and to the other documents that Ancestry has transcribed and digitized and indexed. I do not use anything else on that website. Occasionally, I will go look at the family trees people have posted, and mostly what I find is, so I don't have much use for Ancestry itself, but anyway, I do value and I do give them full credit for the effort they've made to transcribe original documents.
Thank you. That's what I was wondering about, is the documents, the census records, etc.
Yeah, and you'll have to continue paying a subscription. And when you transfer the test result, it doesn't remove it from Ancestry. It's still in Ancestry. It's just that you've transferred the test results to family tree DNA. I mean, you know, now you have both places to look at your test results.
So do I need to join family tree first?
No, because family tree is not a membership website like Ancestry is. Family tree DNA, all of the people who belong to family tree DNA are people who have tested there, and that's the only way you can join. Now, in your case, you haven't tested there, but you're transferring test results there.
Correct.
So that's how your $19 is what makes you a member of Family Tree DNA. And if you decide to do any other tests at Family Tree DNA for yourself, you could do an mtDNA test, which is kind of expensive. And mtDNA is not very productive genealogically, because most women whose ancestors came from Western Europe end up in the H haplogroup, which is not very informative. On the other hand, when I first tested at Family Tree DNA back in 2006, that's the only test I could do. So first I did the cheap, well, not the cheapest one. I did the middle expensive one, and it didn't do anything. So finally I broke down and I did the full mitochondrial sequence. And when I recommend tests today, I only recommend the full mitochondrial sequence for women, for mtDNA. Now, men have mtDNA too, so they can do that. mtDNA passes from a mother to all of her children. It dead ends in the sons. They don't pass it on to anybody. But the daughters pass it on to all their children. So a man, his mtDNA will match his sister's son, but that's all. And that's because he got it from his mother. So, but in my case, when I did the test, it turned out, even though my ancestors came from Western Europe, I do not have the H haplogroup. My haplogroup is V3C in mitochondrial DNA. And I submitted that to GenBank. And then about 2009-10, a man named Marleen Van Horne in Belgium at Erasmus University created mtDNA phylogenetic tree. And because it turned out that my haplogroup is so rare, I was chosen from all the people who have registered that haplogroup at GenBank. And my haplogroup is one of the defining haplogroups for, or my genome is one of the defining genomes for that haplogroup on the mtDNA phylogenetic tree. And so that's kind of exciting because that gives me a small piece of immortality.
So in my case, the original question I asked, what is my first step? Do I go to Family Tree and open up a account with them, or do I go just Ancestry and say transfer it to Family Tree?
Go to familytreedna.com, and the homepage that comes up will show all the sales. And since this is autosomal DNA, you want to pick the autosomal DNA or family finder section, and then just scroll through it until you find the link that says transfer from somebody else.
Thank you. Okay.
And you can transfer it, and then make sure you pay the $19, because otherwise all it'll do is be there and sit there. It'll give you matches, but it won't give you access to the analysis tools.
Okay.
And they have really good analysis tools.
Okay. Thank you. I understand. Thank you.
Okay. And then depending upon how deep your pocket is, you can consider doing the mitochondrial DNA. You might get lucky like I did and find something different and interesting. I started to say that when I found that my haplogroup was V3C, and I went out on the web and looked up where that haplogroup originated, it turns out somewhere in my maternal ancestry, I had ancestors who were reindeer herders in Lapland, because that haplogroup is very concentrated among the reindeer herders of Lapland.
U5B is also from up there too.
Yeah. So
That's what mine is.
So when you do the mitochondrial DNA test and you turn up with something different than H, it'll probably tell you something about your ancestry that you may not have had any idea about.
I have nobody from Finland that I know of.
Well, I don't either. And see, I got that from my maternal great grandmother. And she theoretically, she came from Germany, but she came from a part of Germany that is close to Denmark. And I'm wondering if she had a family that had migrated from up above the Arctic Circle down through the Scandinavian countries to Denmark and into Lower Saxony in Germany. And since I can't get any information about her parents, I'm sort of stuck with her.
Marleen, there's another comment in the chat box from Suzanne. She says, I thought we said Western Europe was R, not H. Is there a difference?
No, R is for men. H is for women.
Thank you for that clarification. And then
Welcome.
Connie said, should Q haplogroup, what should Q haplogroup be?
Okay, I Googled Q haplogroup and see down here it says haplogroup Q or QM242 is a Y chromosome DNA haplogroup that is primarily subclade haplogroup Q1, which includes numerous subclades and so on and so forth, or is in Central Asia.
Okay, I took a picture of that.
Okay, well, there's more information here. So just, bring up a tab and go down there and say you want male Q haplogroup. And you see here's a thing on Wikipedia. Here's another one. You can Exopedia. You can read all it. Dispersals of Siberian Y chromosome haplogroup Q.
Oh, maybe he is from Genghis Khan.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
Yes.
So you can read all of these here and it'll tell you. And anybody else who already has a haplogroup and wants to know where it came from, just Google the haplogroup and indicate whether it's male or female. And if there's information on it, it'll show up here.
Great, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I'm looking in the chat box. I don't see anything, so we'll give it just a few more seconds.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Yes.
I transferred my autosomal DNA to Family Tree DNA 3 or 4 years ago. And then I took an Mtdna test separate. So I've got the 2 separate kits. I didn't know you could combine them. Or
Yeah, you're supposed to only have 1 kit number.
Well, I have 2.
Yeah. Okay. Go to if you go to Family Tree DNA. Scroll down to the bottom of the page, and there's a place for questions and contact us.
Okay.
And just call them up and ask them what to do about it and if they can combine them.
Okay. Super. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-mm. Anybody else?
Anybody else?
Actually,
We're not
Marleen,
ready.
this
Yeah.
I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
I have my mother has a cousin that sent out an email recently about his haplogroup. And I've done my mom's and my DNA. Why are our haplogroups different if it's on that same side of the family?
Wait a minute. What haplogroups are you talking about?
Okay, so my maternal haplogroup is like T2 something. And he's saying the haplogroup that he's sending out talking about our shared family is L38.
All right. let
Why
me
are those?
ask, let me ask this question. First, I need to know what kind of a test it was. Was it yDNA, autosomal DNA? You don't get a haplogroup for autosomal DNA, or mitochondrial DNA. We need to know that. Now, when you say you and your mother tested, did you and your mother do the same test?
Yes and no. I've done two, and my mom's only done one. So
What one did she do?
she did Ancestry, and I did Ancestry and 23andMe. They were
Okay.
gifts.
Stop right there. Stop right there. I can't answer your question
Okay.
because in the first place, 23andMe and Ancestry only test autosomal DNA.
Okay.
Autosomal DNA does not have haplogroups.
Okay.
Now, if
So
you
they're
wanted
guessing on it.
well, yes, sort of. 23andMe does give you a haplogroup because I tested there too for health reasons. And 23andMe will tell you what your haplogroup is. And quite frankly, 23andMe got my haplogroup right before Family Tree DNA ever did. But so 23andMe will tell you an accurate haplogroup, but they do not test mitochondrial DNA, which is where you get that haplogroup from. They do some, I don't know what they do, you know, some slick and dirty test that gives them an idea.
Okay.
Now, this uncle, is that what it is, an uncle?
Yeah. Oh, a cousin.
Where did he test and what did he test?
Well, I know for a fact he's tested in Ancestry. I think he's tested in one or two other places. I'm not sure.
Okay, here's the deal. He should show up as a match for you and your mother in Ancestry.
Yes, he does.
Okay. But the information that an autosomal test from Ancestry gives you is just that. It doesn't really give you haplogroup information. It doesn't give you yDNA information. It
Okay.
doesn't give you anything. But I have, as I explained before, I'm very much in favor of men doing yDNA and autosomal or family finder tests, and women, the only choice you can have as a woman is to do an autosomal or family finder test to actually find relations. A mitochondrial test isn't likely to give you matches. Now, Suzanne and her cousin, I think it is, both did the mitochondrial test. And when Suzanne's results come back, she is going to be an exact match for her cousin, because that's
Okay.
just the way it goes. Assuming all of a sudden her cousin isn't related to her, but that's another story. So for a woman, all you can do is an autosomal test, and then if you want to spend the extra money, do a mitochondrial test. Now, since you've already done the autosomal, you can transfer both you and your mother to Family Tree DNA. And
Okay.
each of you gets a separate account. It'll be two $19 charges to do that.
Okay.
And then if your mother's still alive, do the mitochondrial DNA test on her, because she's one generation further back.
Yeah.
And theoretically, you don't have to do it on you unless all of a sudden you decide you're just real rich and you need to do it. And then
Okay. And I'm looking at his email, and he did a yDNA test that gave him the haplogroup of L38.
Okay.
So
well, then what we have to do here is, just a minute, we have to look again up here. Okay, L38. This, it looks like, is sometimes nicknamed for Liechtenstein
Yeah.
haplogroup because it is in the Liechtenstein cave in the German Harz Mountains.
And that's the
Oh, he's
article that he sent us. Is about the bones recently found in the Liechtenstein cave.
Okay, so
Oh. Okay.
and he's, how is he related to you?
He is my mom's cousin, first cousin.
Okay, so first cousin. He's your mother's first cousin. So their parents are brothers and sisters. So their grandparents.
Their
All right.
fathers are brothers, yes.
Okay, the fathers are brothers. Well, your mother is not going to have any of this L38 at all because that's a Y haplogroup. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you start comparing the autosomal DNA, you may find if the family came from that area, you should find it in both of the brother and the sister.
Okay.
You should find people that have genetic origins in that area. Okay, have we
Okay.
got any other questions?
Marlene,
Yeah.
I've only tested autosomal, and my maternal haplogroup, I was told from either Ancestry or 23andMe, was L3 DLB. Now, that's a maternal L. So if I get my brother to test, his Y would be not L, it could be something different.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
But if he's your brother,
Yes.
and you test his mitochondria, well, okay, let me back up. You just did autosomal DNAs, and as a bonus, these two companies told you you were L.
Correct.
All right. I'm going to make a big suggestion and tell you to go to Family Tree DNA and buy the full mitochondrial sequence, because if that is your mitochondrial haplogroup, that's very interesting. Just a minute, let me bring this up. Okay, let me say something about the L mitochondrial haplogroup. That indicates African origins.
Yes.
So the L, all right, on yDNA and the phylogenetic tree, the phylogenetic tree begins with A, and A indicates Africa.
Yes.
The mitochondrial phylogenetic tree begins with L, and that indicates a female origins in Africa.
Okay. Yes, I believe I have a great great grandfather who was born on Cape Verde, off the
Yeah,
coast.
but that's not female.
It's on my mother's side.
That still doesn't matter.
Okay.
Mitochondrial DNA only passes from mother to children, mother to children, mother to children. Men do not pass mitochondrial DNA on to their descendants.
Okay, correct.
So having an L mitochondrial haplogroup indicates that you had to have had a Black female ancestor.
Cool. Okay.
And that is kind of exciting, because when you consider that could go back to Eve, as in Adam and.
Correct. Okay. All right. Exciting.
I mean, I like to say it like that because the first human being, beings were Adam and Eve. So eventually we all have to go back to them, at least theoretically.
Okay. Even more reason for me to transfer to Family Tree and get my brother finally to test Y.
Yes. have him test Y. And it all depends upon how deep your pockets are, what you do. If he's already done a yDNA test,
No.
I mean, not a an autosomal DNA test, just have him transfer that to his same account.
No, he's
where
done
he does-
nothing. He hasn't done
Okay.
tested at all.
Oh, okay, then have him do the whole ball of wax. And if there's this possible, well, yeah, if there's a possibility that he'll have a mitochondrial haplogroup different from what would come from Europe, like H, then by all means do that. I mean, because that would be interesting information. It would cost, but it would be interesting information. And you don't have to do it all at once because they have sales all the time. So we're having a sale right now at Family Tree DNA, and there'll probably be one over Labor Day. And oh, something that you should understand, because I talk about being tested at Family Tree. I'm a volunteer and I don't receive any kind of compensation for any tests that I recommend.
Okay.
Kathy, I
Thank-
want to recommend a book if you have time to read a book. There's a really wonderful book called The 7 Daughters of Eve, and it's by an
Yeah.
author named Brian Sykes. And if you
Yeah.
live close enough here to our library, we have it. You can come and check it out and take it home and read it. But if you don't live close enough to our library, you can just go to your local library and get a copy.
Okay.
But it goes into a lot of what Marleen is talking about how you could trace women's origins, to Africa, and how they had, at least at the time the book was published, which was not that long ago, but at that time when it was published, down to 7 women, all of humanity can be traced to 7 women, according to
Yeah.
that book.
So
Yeah.
remind me the name of the book again. 7.
It's called The 7 Daughters of Eve,
Great.
and the author's name is Brian Sykes, BryanSykes.
Okay.
He's actually written several books. I think he passed away, but he wrote several books before he passed away, and that's a really great one. It's actually one of my most favorite books.
Okay. Very cool.
Okay, any other questions? People are saying thank you in the chat box. So
You're
we'll
welcome.
go ahead and I will stop the recording then. Here, hold on.